It's a case we've talked about in the past, and I think a lot of us thought it was kind of said and done. An interesting study on how cults are formed and how influenceable people can be when under the control of a nefarious leader. We're talking about NXIVM in that case. But this is not the part you think that you know. This time, it's not just about coercion and branding and manipulation. Some people may wonder why we have this graphic. It's because Keith Raniere carved his initials into his followers right about there on a woman's body. I'm just trying to point out how horrible that is. It's about the FBI itself in this case. Keith Raniere's conviction was considered a slam dunk, but new allegations of evidence tampering have thrown a wrench into the case. Claims of manipulated metadata, chain of custody violations, and pre-choreographed searches have raised questions about the integrity of the investigation itself. Could this be enough to overturn the conviction, or does the sheer weight of other evidence, like branding women, render it meaningless? Joining us is defense attorney and former prosecutor Eric Faddis. Eric, to help us kind of break all of this down, let's start here. If these allegations of FBI misconduct are proven true, how much damage does it do to the credibility of the case, and at what point does the prosecutorial misconduct overweigh the crimes themselves?
It certainly raises some concerns. We want law enforcement to be above board. We want to have faith that what they're doing is lawful and that they're not deceiving the jury or anything like that. And so when you have sort of the specter of this misconduct, that's a big problem. That being said, there is a substantial amount of evidence against Keith Raniere, including in items of evidence that aren't really affected by any sort of metadata manipulation and chain of custody issues, and just the egregiousness of the conduct that was found in his case. I think does not necessarily win the day, but there are certainly some things to look at and to consider for the appellate court.
I'm wondering what could actually happen after this, because the folks who are coming up and pointing these things out are former FBI agents. They've looked at the metadata. Their claims are collectively, yes, this metadata was messed with. There's no doubt about that. That's really not up for debate. It is a fact. It is what it is. Then I guess it comes down to, well, how was it messed with? Was it messed with intentionally? Was it some sort of a computer glitch, or not even a glitch, just someone not using something called a write blocker to help protect the actual data itself? They're arguing that the metadata on one of the photos, or some of the photos that were used in this, and to argue that Keith Raniere had been abusing a minor, is inaccurate, because the photo metadata, basically date stamp of when this thing was taken, she would have been of age, and the date stamps that were presented to the court showed her being underage at that moment in time. Obviously, it's a big thing to argue and say this was a minor or this is an adult. We're talking a very short window of time, though, in this. And then, of course, you add on everything else that was done. I mean, is that something that could lead to conviction being overturned? I mean, where could this really go?
What elevates the importance of this metadata manipulation is the fact that Keith Raniere and his alleged interactions with the minor were really the linchpin of the government's case. Now, they had other allegations, other evidence, and other crimes that they asserted, but that was really what drove home the case. And if you look at the Department of Justice's public press release on it, that's what it's really focused on. And so, could a judge look at it and say, hey, because this minor issue was kind of the crux of the case, and because this manipulation goes directly to that point, does that entitle Keith Raniere to a new trial? That's going to be up to that judge.
How do you think a jury would react to that? Let's say everything else is presented as it was, the branding, the sexual manipulation, all of that, and two adults. Let's just say everything is within the confines of adults here that are I guess someone could argue willingly participating in NXIVM, and they're finding benefit to it, while the rest of the world looks in horror as you get branded with Keith Raniere's initials on your thigh, as he manipulates you into sexual, escapades with himself. One could still say these were adults; they chose to do this. Yes, it's unconventional at least, but maybe not illegal. But you get to that territory of sexual coercion and things of that nature, then of course you get into more legal arguments. Where do you think it would stand with a jury if you just simply say that this one person was technically not underage, but everything else still stands? He didn't go to prison just because one was a minor. He went to prison over the collective evidence that was pointing to Keith Raniere being a monster.
Right. I mean, the profound ick factor from the minor dynamic in this case can't be overstated. That being said, there's also allegations of like wire fraud, of obstruction, of physical assault. There are other alleged victims who are not minors. And so I think a jury looking at that, even though it's not as horrible because they're adults, it's still pretty horrible. And we're still talking about like deforming someone's body to put your own like logo on them, which is just grotesque and objectifying and everything else. And so I think that there is enough horrible stuff there going on that a jury would still be terribly taken back by those allegations, even when we take the minor component out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a screwed up case, and really kind of another case of cultish, type behavior. But I mean, look, there are cults that exist in this country that are not necessarily doing anything illegal, at least not that we know of, if they haven't really been investigated and they haven't raised enough red flags to be investigated. And people can say that they got a lot out of this. There are still people that say that NXIVM was a great thing for them. It really benefited them, and they didn't experience any of the abuse of Keith Raniere, but it was more so people that were in the DOS program, the kind of subset of NXIVM that was created by Keith Raniere and Allison Mack. Both of which have been charged and are spending their time in prison for it. Could that be thrown in? I mean, how powerful is that? Where you have some going, yeah, we got branded, but at the time we thought it was right, but looking back, it was insane and horrible. Yeah, I mean, it's insane and horrible any way you look at it, but you have all these other people that can say, look, this was great. Keith was really beneficial in my life, changed my life, really, was a great boon to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me a little bit of an argument that Diddy's attorneys recently made, where they're saying, hey, look, there's videos of these freak offs and it's deviant behavior and you might not be into it, but that doesn't mean it's non consensual and that doesn't mean it's criminal. That doesn't mean a person should be in prison because they have a lifestyle with which you don't agree. Now, certainly there's a counter argument to that in the Raniere case and the Diddy case.
Yeah.
But that being said, we got to make sure we're not criminalizing lifestyles that might be outside of the norm. I'm not saying that's what happened with Keith Raniere, but it's something to be mindful of.
Yeah, I'm just playing devil's advocate here of like what could happen if he does get another trial. Do you think this is enough to get him another trial if it does turn out that, I guess you have to show intent too. Would you not have to show intent that the FBI purposely did this? One of the things that's been brought up is that they did not use what's called a right blocker. And I'm not super familiar with what a right blocker is. I don't know if you are. I assume it's kind of, in layman's terms, read-only or not read-only on a file when you go to properties, or using a program that automatically makes it read-only so your computer cannot put its own metadata on it, possibly restamp the time on it. Because I am wondering if that's really what happened. Maybe they went into a computer at some point in time. We've all had computers where the dates are not correct. And did it stamp it with something unbeknownst to the FBI agents, but it never would have stamped it with that had they used a right blocker?
Yeah, I think that's my understanding of a right blocker too. And at best, it's shoddy investigative measures by the FBI. At worst, it's intentional manipulation of evidence to make someone look more guilty. Certainly, that's a huge problem. It'd be a huge problem for a court, especially if they could prove the intentionality behind it. That being said, they would also have to prove that, but for that happening, but for all these errors, the jury likely would have come to a different conclusion. I don't think we get there. I think even if you take out all of that alleged misconduct, there is still just so much against Raniere, testimony, evidence, damning material that would solidify that conviction on appeal, even if this manipulation turns out to be a problem.